Welcome back to Biophilic Solutions, a podcast that's all about the human connection to nature.
Nature doesn't just surround us. We are nature. Our bodies, minds, and even our communities are tuned into its rhythms.
But in today's fast-paced modern world, we've drifted away from that connection, and the consequences are showing up everywhere, in the environment, in our politics and culture, and even how we feel about life.
On this podcast, we sit down with leading experts to uncover how nature influences everything, from the way we design our cities to the way we govern, heal, and make meaning of the world.
Rediscovering our place in nature isn't just about feeling good. It's the kind of transformation we need to create a better world.
So let's get to today's episode.
Hey, Jennifer.
Hey, Monica.
So, Jen, this is a little bit of an experiment for us.
It is indeed.
We're here to let you know we're going to see what happens. But the reason we're coming to you, it's just Jen and I today. We are 99 episodes in.
Yes. Yes. And this is number 100.
Yes. And now we are at 100. So you have joined us on this special day. And we have had so many incredible people on, scientists, right? Designers, professors, visionaries, farmers, policymakers. We even had a poet. And I think every conversation we've had, Jen, nudges us a little bit further to think about the world in a broader way. I mean, it's always sort of within our theme of biophilic solutions, and hopefully we're always bringing hope. But, we're creating a slightly wider, greener lens. And that's what we hope we're bringing to you guys.
I love that you just said that, because you're absolutely right. I think about every conversation we've had and all that we've learned. So I remember every time we jump off the call, like myself and you and Katrina, we're always just in awe of the conversations we have, because it's so profoundly interesting. And I learn something new every time we speak to someone. And that excites me, because then we get to share that wisdom with all of our listeners. And that's just so cool. So cool.
No, so we thought it would be fun to take a minute or maybe 30 and just sift through the highlights and call out the big lessons that sort of keep resurfacing. Yes. And, if you guys want to send in, other ones that are your favorites or things we missed, let us know. But I don't know, Jen. So let's just give it a shot here and see what we come up with. So what's the first sort of lesson that you feel like we've learned?
Well, I think this theme comes up over and over and over again. This has been years, the same kind of theme of the slowdown and how important it is to take that time of understanding how important it is to slow down in such a chaotic world that's getting more chaotic. I just feel like our pace of life has been so frenetic, and so it's becoming so increasingly harder for us to just focus and be still and just be quiet. And I think that's where we need these lessons right now. And we're spending so much time doom scrolling. I know I have to really take time to say, okay, step away from the phone and stop the doom scrolling. And then becoming more isolated. And we're, of course, doing this all usually indoors. So.
Yeah. Well, and I just read something this morning that one of the big tech companies is going to put their app on a TV so you can scroll.
Oh my gosh.
On your TV. I don't really know how, but I was like, really? Is that, do we need that? I don't want that. I mean, it's kind of bad enough that we, at the end of the day, we're so exhausted and we haven't slowed down that we just need to, or so many of us, choose to just turn on, a streaming service and just sit there and watch 4 episodes of something because you're trying to decompress, when it would probably be so much better for us to get outside and take a really lovely walk, even in the sweltering heat. I don't know what it's like in New York, but Atlanta is lovely right now.
We've had that. It's gone now, thankfully.
Okay. But it's like nature, we know, right? Nature doesn't rush. It's such a restorative option. And so how do we, again, going back to what somebody said the other day, we're not looking for perfect, but it's we just have to be more thoughtful. Yes. And slowing down just came up and up, came up so many times in our conversations.
Yes, cadence that we have to be aware of, because if we're aware of our own cadence through our day, how are we slowing down? Are we speeding up? And why are we speeding up? Do we have to rush to a meeting? Do we have to rush for that call? There's a lot of rushing. So like you just said, that restorative nature that is us. So how do we show up in the world, and what is that cadence like? and be aware. Like, I think a lot of our guests are talking about the importance of being in tune with the seasons and with nature and the sunsets and the sunrises. And I feel like right now it's summer, and I'm very, very much aware of those sunrises and sunsets. I think all of us are, because they're so beautiful in the summer and we're out there enjoying them. So I think we've had some really great guests talking about this.
Yeah. And I think some of them will even tell us about how your heart rate drops, the cortisol eases, you reignite your imagination just by being out. And that, I think that slowing down also goes with, like, I don't know if our kids are bored anymore, and I think being bored sometimes is what ignites creativity. And so we resist it. We constantly are looking for this, I guess, dopamine rush with these screens and stuff. So, I think one of the great from Sister Seasons, remember Rebecca?
Rebecca, she's wonderful.
She was great. And so I think she has a great point to illustrate the importance of seasonality and rest. So let's hear a little bit from her.
Monica, you were talking about the exhaustion that, like, especially women are always stuck in. And I think that's where it's like, when we look to nature, we're seeing that these natural cycles are regenerative cycles. But the world that we're living in right now pretends like we are in perpetual summer, right? We're not given, no human, no living being on this planet is given the permission to honor that winter, that rest phase, or even like the other phases, that are more inward focused, right? That are more nuanced. And so, like, when we're always on all the time, we're kept in perpetual exhaustion. We act as if we are above and outside of like nature's laws. And it serves to maintain the status quo.
So I think another one that maybe dovetails into that is, it's all connected, right? When we slow down, we start to see and we start to understand the connectedness of everything. We talk about all the time, we are part of nature. We are one with nature, but the built environment, the world isolates us, right? Automobiles, they don't have sidewalks in places. And so they sort of force you away from nature. And I think not only, nature's a great example of how, everything's interconnected, from like the trees and the roots and the mycelium and the mushrooms, but we start to have siloed thinking, right? We have disconnected thinking. We don't understand the bigger picture.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I've learned so much from our guests about this, because you're right. Everything's in a silo. We live in silos, which we're not supposed to live in a silo. And then that shuts us off from educating ourselves about different cultures and why it matters, and how do we become healthier because we live in harmony with understanding and in our spaces and places. And then also like the systems thinkings around like choices, that really affect, food chains, supply chains, social chains. It's all, like you just said, it's all connected.
Well, and I think tying into systems thinking, so much of what we hear from people is trying to educate. There is that connectivity, but we set ecology or nature over here. And then we say, the financial markets are here, this is the financial outcomes. And then, we're not, and this is the wellness. But if you really think about it, like if we're not taking care of the ecology, it's going to cost money and it's going to cost health. But everybody silos them. And so instead of putting them all together, like companies aren't being charged for discharge of wastewater or, more of a carrot, getting the, saying, hey, we're going to actually give you a benefit. I mean, they've done a little bit of that, but hey, if you do this thing, I guess we're seeing it with LEED and WELL and these certifications, but I think you're right. Like we need systems thinking to think about it as a larger whole. And, once you sort of see the interdependence of everything, the solutions stop looking like isolated fixes, like, oh, we're just going to fix this stream over here. And we start understanding how it, supports the ecosystem and then the health of the neighborhood. And then I can go out to it. It's not dirty. There's not, so I don't know. That's a huge thing. So who do you think kind of helped us along with that.
Now that you just said around the temperatures and heat, I think a great example was when we had Dr. Howard Frumpkin discussing the wide-ranging impacts of rising temperatures, because he really kind of made me step back a little bit. Because I mean, we know, but until he put into specifics, I was like, wow, you're right. There's so much here that we have to be educated on, of how those impacts of rising temperatures are impacting all of us and how we live every day.
Yeah. So let's hear from Howie.
Let's talk about heat. Heat seems like a simple thing. If you're in the midst of very hot weather, maybe it's a heat wave, or maybe it's just more extremely hot days during the summertime. There's the risk of dehydration. There's the fact that you'll be less likely to go outside and be physically active. But it goes even beyond that. So during extremely hot weather, we know that injuries are on the rise. Aggressive behavior rises. Suicidal behavior rises. Kidney disease rises. Sleep quality is impaired. So this goes on, and this is just heat.
So, I mean, Jen, I love this example because it shows how this one thing, heat, results in so many issues. And it might be easy to draw a straight line from rising temperatures to crop failure, but it's harder for us to see how heat can, make us physically inactive and then more aggressive.
Yeah, I know. It's really, that's what blew me away. And it's like, you think it's like, it's really scary to hear about the ripple effect of all these problems, but I think it's helpful to really keep in mind that smart solutions also have wide reaching impacts.
Yeah. Well, and Helena Norberg Hodge was amazing about why localization is a solution multiplier. So let's hear what she has to say about that.
An interconnected, more localized economy everywhere in the world is in people's interest. And as pressures are building up, we're seeing, as I say, some mayors and some local governments beginning to make changes, but we want as many people as possible, anyone listening here, to also put out the big picture. So then all of these people who do care, who are spending time and money to make the world a better place, can sing to the same hymn sheet. Doesn't mean they now say, I don't care about my issue of plastic or dolphins or children. That's still my main focus. But I know that making changes to this economic system is going to be one of the most beneficial and the sort of systemic shift that we need to really everything we care about.
Jen, what else? I mean,
I know there's a big theme. I'm gonna jump into number 3 because
great.
This is one that we always, I feel like it hits that mark every time. But the leading with hope and optimism. Yeah. I think that is such a huge theme for us, and I'm so happy and proud that we can say that, because we talk about this, I think, on every single episode.
Yeah, well, and we're not serial murder stories. We're not clickbait, doom and gloom. We just really want to talk about true, substantial conversations that's going to broaden people's awareness. And we just sprinkle it in, or we try and pull out of our guests, optimism, because, it's such a powerful force. And we know that climate conversations, which isn't what we talk about, but that is a huge part of it, can be scary and overwhelming. And I hope, and, I hope our listeners, that our guests leave you hopeful. I mean, they leave us hopeful. They leave me hopeful. I'm always completely jazzed after having one of these conversations.
Yeah. I think one of the guests who really shifted my perspective in all of this, when you think about this, was Tim Lenton.
Yeah.
I mean, that work that he does is really focusing on the opposite of fear, but how do we really, the so-called positive tipping points, because we often hear about the negative tipping points all the time.
Yeah.
And he's so very clear-eyed about the problems we face, but he leads with such optimism and hope and excitement in a way that really inspired me. And I think it inspired all of us and our listeners. So let's hear from Tim on how social movements and emerging technologies can generate lasting and positive change.
It's manifestly clear to me, and I'm sure to everybody that sometimes human societies change abruptly and irreversibly through these kind of self-propelling changes. And I could cite many examples, starting with maybe social movements, protest movements and political movements. Like one of my distant relatives was one of the famous suffragettes, Lillian Lenton, who I took a lot of inspiration from that movement and her as an individual. But there's a whole series historically of political movements that Erica Chenoweth and others have shown you only need 3.5% active participation in a non-violent social movement for all of those ones to have succeeded, and many succeeded with less. So that's our kind of tipping point change in society. But another crucial one is we sometimes can abruptly change technology and our relationship with it. And when it comes to solving the climate and ecological crisis, it's all about changing the activities that either emit the greenhouse gases or cause the habitat destruction or whatever. And when you get down to that, well, that's about changing technology as well as about changing society. So it's all about hunting down these strong reinforcing feedbacks.
So Jen, nature is so resilient, and that's another cause for hope. Like we see that, right? And even the cycles of, getting spring and seeing all the green and the flowers coming out, it just, right? It lifts your spirit. And I think, again, going back to slowing down is like, not letting the chaos of modern life get to us, and really living in greater connection with nature. Just that is a hopeful act.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And I also like, the statement or thought that keep going because your work matters. Because I always feel like we think we're so small and things that we do really don't matter, but they all matter. Like every little step we take to educate, to understand, to take action, every single step matters.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, how can we be part of the solution? But don't let it be this overwhelming, I have to solve everything. It's just like, what's your sphere of influence, right? We talked about, probably we haven't talked about this for a while, but I remember hearing from somebody that it's like, what's your superpower? Think about that. And what can you use of your superpower to make change in whatever area that you want? And I think that's what all of our guests are doing. They're creating change and looking for solutions in their industry or niche or, whatever kind of area we think about. And so I also feel like when we talk about hope and optimism, like somehow that has become somehow naive, right?
Yes.
And I just think it's unfair when people sort of poo-poo you that you're being, whatever, Pollyanna, naive. It's like, it can be a strategy, right? It can be strategic. Then to your point, it tells your nervous system, keep going.
Yes.
Your work matters, right? Like, and that was, right, a whole conversation we had from Anne-Therese Gennari.
Yes. She had the Climate Optimist Handbook.
Yes. Climate Optimist Handbook. Fantastic. And I think that's the kind of stuff that like we need to read, we need to listen to, we need to hear from, or just like follow her on Instagram. But let's hear a little bit from her.
So what I teach today and what I believe is true climate optimism can only exist in this sort of intersection between grounded awareness and empowered action, which means that you recognize that we are in a big crisis mode, but of course you want to see positive movement moving forward and you want to believe in a better future, but you also understand that in order to remain an optimist, you have to participate in that shift. You have to show up for the change. And not only because you should and you have to kind of like earn your score as a climate optimist, but actually because these actions in themselves will come back and reward you. You will feel better, more optimistic, more motivated, and you will start to actually believe in a positive future. So for me, being a climate optimist is recognizing that we're in a very significant time in history. And that means that we all have this opportunity to participate in what we want to create.
All right, Monica, there's so many more we could go through. What do you think is your next choice?
I kind of like the thought that good design matters, because we do talk a lot about biophilic design, which, we consider to be an aspect of biophilia. There's a lot of different things and wonderful ways. Our friend Bill Browning, has patterns. We talk about biophilic principles for community building at Serenbe. But I think biophilic design, which takes into all of those ideas, is great in order to build, restorative and kind of robust habitats. So that could be landscape, that could be interiors. It could be in a hospital, right? The recharge rooms that you do, how do we find those places?
They all matter. I think that's my most exciting conversation. I love these conversations about our built environment, because good design does matter, not just for it's beautiful, but, it's really beautiful for my brain.
Right. Well, and Dr. Anjan, who we adore, he talks about the brain and beauty. And so he's talking about the science behind when you have amazing, good design, what it does to the brain.
Yes.
But we've had so many incredible architects on.
Yes.
And I know Dr. Tawanda Green, is an architect, and she really says that we need to remember, which is great, that the brain is one of your clients. That's their client. So let's hear from her. She'll explain a little further what that means.
So that's a big part of how I introduce my students in my class to the concept of, so what's human-centric design? I mean, architects have always been building for humans. Yes, we have, but now we're lucky to understand exactly how the brain is the true client and understand how the body is connected to the brain, and that the environment that we are creating has a direct connection to how we feel every single day, day after day, month after month, and year after year.
Yes. So good.
I know. We love her. Yeah.
We do love her. And I love that I keep bumping into her at different conferences. She's so great. But you're right. All these little micro doses of nature, I like to say. We think about how we evolved in dappled light, in fresh air, and in community. Of course. So it all matters, but we lost our way. And Dr. Tawanda did a great job of kind of bringing us back home.
Yep.
So it's really, really interesting and as well as important.
Yeah. And I think the fact we don't think about it, but poor design can contribute to chronic disease, and good design can prevent illness and promote healing. And we've heard about those studies in hospitals, in schools, and I think that's something that we talk a lot more, is that really raising up these professors and scientists who are doing the research is so important, because sometimes the marketplace, has to have their metrics, and I understand it. It's not just a gut feeling that people are going to go on when they're building a multi-million-dollar building or hospital. But at the same time, I hope eventually we get to a place where it's just common sense that we need this. But it now, as it's sort of a newer concept, biophilic design, we do need those studies. We need to have the research.
When you think about that too, now when you can't unknow. So speaking of this, I'm so glad we're recording this today. I just got back home to the city, New York City, and I'm walking through Central Park, and I'm looking around how beautiful the old buildings are. Yeah. But then again, how horrifically ugly all these glass buildings that are going up. There's no soul there.
I know.
But when we're surrounded by concrete and cut off from green spaces, we really become disconnected from ourselves as well as the natural world. That affects everything from our mental health to how we approach sustainability, because if we don't see it, we don't see it. So until we learn about why it matters, that's when oh my gosh, we have to do something about this. That changes us.
Yeah. And, we were recently in traveling, and we stayed in this little square where you couldn't even bring your automobile in, right? It was an much older town. And it was lovely, right? You didn't see cars. You walked everywhere. It just was a much more beautiful design, but it was harkened back, right? Historically, it was created. And then as the day we were leaving the house, the little town is like a circle, there's one street all the way around it. And then little streets that come into it, but they were doing this sheep, like
really?
4,000 sheep were being brought in, and it's like a historic where they were basically moving them from one field to the other for the summer or something.
Wow.
And they go around, they block off the whole town and they go around twice and with all the sheep herders. And it's like, that's nature. And like, this is, we don't think about that, but that's a huge thing that everybody comes out for.
Yeah.
And
let's tell people that wasn't in America, that was in Europe.
Yeah, that was in Europe. I know. But I just thought, again, the built environment and then how we utilize it is so important. Mm-hmm. And I'll go back to, I don't know why I brought the sheep in there, but it just was such a cool thing that like nobody would ever think about creating that today, but it like brings everybody together to celebrate. But back to walkability, Jeff Speck, amazing. So like, research walkability, he was creating this whole concept of like we can have a better built environment if it's walkable. So that logic applies. Let's hear from him.
I found that walkability is the best framework to do good urban design and city planning. A lot of people come at this space from a health perspective or a just personal activity perspective, or they're just in love with walking. I love to walk, but for me, I came at this as a way to better understand and practice urban design. Learning over the years that if you're successful in making a walkable place, then you've probably made a great place.
Like you said, Monica, it's all about good design because it encourages people to connect and you have a sense of belonging to yourself in that place, because isolated or car-centric design can lead to loneliness, social fragmentation. I mean, we see it every day here, especially in America.
Yeah. And more it's coming up that the last Surgeon General, kind of declared an epidemic with loneliness. It really is like something that was already happening, but I think with COVID, we just didn't quite get out of it. And we need spaces that encourage you to get out of your house, encourage you to get out of your car. And I think one of the things that we've talked about, and I know Tim Beatley was really great about this, was we can have systemic inequalities, with the built environment, right? Like, where is green space? Do you have access to it? How clean is the air? How affordable is the housing? Is the neighborhood safe? And trees, he did a study, are a huge indicator for kind of a lot of those things, right? Whether it's clean air, it's a wealthier neighborhood, it's a safer neighborhood, better outcomes. And, just planting trees.
Yes. And
can
to keep
change.
Cool,
yeah.
Right?
We didn't even talk about the heat. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's all like when you see all these stats around, the heat domes, but if we plant the trees, it helps cool people. It's interesting that we're talking about this today because we had a heat wave in the East Coast this week. And here I was outside of New York City, but I was in New Jersey and I saw these women that were workers in probably a factory, and it was lunchtime. I was driving by and they were all huddled underneath the trees just to keep cool because it was probably 102 out. Ugh. And they were finding shade. And that's what we've done for millennia. Yeah. As creatures of the outside, we just found shade to be the place.
Yeah. And to sort of just wrap up good design, like, the trees are a design element, right? That can make change. But, the built environment back to sort of like materials, energy systems, land use, like can be just as powerful. And that's where we humans are putting our mark on the land. We need to be more thoughtful about what we're choosing. That is just as big of a part of good design as like the aesthetics is the actual materials. And again, go back to how it can be a really powerful climate and environmental solution. So
such a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, Monica, I'm going to ask you for your fifth idea.
Well, sort of maybe thinking a little bit similar is just like simple solutions, right?
Oh, yes.
Good design, maybe we could call a simple solution, but I think simple solutions, and you could be little things like, planting an herb garden. So you're connected, that way, cooking more, or, we have blueberry bushes at Serenbeat. We have a ton of edible landscaping. Before I moved here, never really thought about, I mean, maybe an apple tree, right? But never thought about like planting blueberry bushes or fig trees that just, I grew up in a kind of generic suburban Los Angeles environment. And to me, that's just common sense and a simple solution now.
Yeah. And it's funny. I think since COVID, people are much more aware of what they're creating, their gardens or herb gardens, or now that it's summertime, I'm excited to have my own little garden, and that sharing of community, right? So now it's that ripple effect in a good way of, I created a garden, I tend to it every day. So I'm spending more time outdoors. My hands are in the soil. And of course, whatever I'm growing, I'm also sharing with my neighbors.
Right.
So I'm like looking every day. I said, oh, my basil's growing, my cucumbers, my tomatoes. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the fact that you're seeing this thing grow and that you helped make happen. I mean, there's sort of like purpose in that. And then also you're like maybe changing your diet, or you're adding more vegetables in, and then obviously locally grown fruits and vegetables are just definitely better for you. Yeah. And speaking of, food, even another simple solution is just like composting, right? Like,
I know,
just putting it all together and composting. And if you don't have composting in your neighborhood, like, there's companies now that are coming in if the city's not doing it for you. So that's a great thing. It's like you can advocate for that, or maybe you can work with a farm to take your compost to the farm and they can turn it into, really good soil.
I'm so glad you're talking about that too, because I think about how we had a conversation a few years ago with Nina Marie Leister.
Yes.
And I think about like her conversation about how we can transform a patch of our lawn into a pollinator garden, like an edible landscape, like you just said, because I love watching her, because ever since we spoke to her years ago, I've seen so many headline stories in New York Times, wherever, and they're just stories after stories about the importance of creating lawns that are not so green, but more that are more biodiverse.
Yes, and natural. Yes. Yeah. And that was crazy. I think that was a couple of years ago. And when we interviewed her, she was getting cited and not quite arrested, but like she was getting in trouble with the city because she tore out her lawn and put in this amazing sort of like food forest. Yeah. And then she sort of got the mayor right on her side. Yeah. I'm trying to remember, but let's listen to her about lawns in our society, because I think that was a really light bulb moment for me.
We have a kind of tendency to want to have a landscape of leisure that suggests that we have arrived. When one achieves the suburban dream or the independence of a home, the idea that a lawn represents a state of leisure, wealth, achievement. Think of all the hilarious lawn care commercials you've seen over the years. The guys competing for the greenest, shortest clipped lawn, the weed-free lawn. Some of them are amusing. But underneath that humor is actually something very serious, that lawn, as it was introduced to North America, is actually pasture grasses from Europe that didn't blend well with native North American wildlife, for example. And in fact, it was a tradition of bringing plant life from away to help the colonists feel comfortable and also to aspire to wealth. If you think about the earliest introduction of the lawns in the United States, that's Thomas Jefferson's gift, if you will. And beautiful lawns were landscapes of leisure, but on whose back did they rest? Right. These landscapes were created by labor and oftentimes by slave labor. They were also, in my country, in Canada, they also displaced indigenous plants, native plants that had medicinal, spiritual, and healing properties. So the lawn is an insidious invader of its own, and it requires enormous inputs to maintain. And I wouldn't want to suggest that the lawn is unwelcome as a concept. There are plenty of places in our public spaces where we can all appreciate the common lawn for places of collective celebration, of mourning, of grieving, of protest. So the lawn is a very important symbol for gathering people together on the one hand. That's public space. And on private space, we might want to think about other ways to reintroduce and reconnect with the natural diversity of the places that sustain us.
And all these things we're talking about are just, they're not lifestyle overhauls. Like, they're small, simple steps you can take that if enough of us commit to it, we can make a difference.
Yes.
And again, we don't want to let off, government or corporations. We need policy changes. But I do think that we can feel purposeful, like your garden, with these small moves that, if we repeat them widely and educate people, we can start to shift the culture. I mean, think about farmers markets and how popular they are, or the slow food movement, right? Yeah. Or even just organic, or natural food. So I think we've seen it sort of starts small and then there's a big shift and then it becomes sort of commonplace. So
yeah, I think so too. Is that shift culture, which I'm so thankful that it's happening.
Right.
I think also, like, we had an episode with Allie Kelly from the Ray, who also emphasized this idea that some of the things that she was putting forward were high tech, but others are just total common sense. Like plant that pollinator that creates the habitats on highway ramps that are currently just patches of really barren lawn.
Yeah, that they're having to mow down, and all these resources are going into it. And it's like no reason. Like, what if it looked wild but beautiful? So
I know, because when it's wild, it is beautiful.
Yeah. So I think that that's a big deal. And then so many of these simple solutions, like you were saying, reconnect you to your community. So I think, back to the isolation a little bit, how do you reconnect to community, right? What does that look like?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think I was saying about waving to somebody the other day that when somebody waves at you, like, we talk about like small towns maybe, or Sammy does that, you feel seen, right? And that goes back to belonging, right? That there's a friendliness, there's a feeling of safety. And I don't know, we just need more of that. And then we're more likely to take care of our neighbors, right? No matter our differences, like we all want the same things. And I think that kind of goes to Douglas Rushkoff, my crush of all crushes. Is that, he
Douglas Rushkoff.
I know. We have to go to New York and see him. He's so fabulous.
You can come visit me anytime. We'll go see him.
I will. And so, his whole, well, not whole, but, he talks about it with his podcast is Team Human. We're all on the same team. Are you ready to join? And again, we forget that, right? And so I love him for that and community, but he also talks about, really how, 1% of the US population, what if we designated for serving global problems, and then the rest of us can focus on supporting our local communities, right?
Yes.
And because we get so caught up in these huge global ideas that I could do nothing.
Yeah.
I don't know how to fix the oceans heating up. I have no idea. But what if the one, not the 1%, but 1%.
Yeah.
Really just put a stake in the ground and really focus on these big problems. And then the rest of us could be more community focused, look at the local level and what we can do sort of, in our own community.
And I'm so glad he brought that up because he is such a great speaker and I love listening to him and I love his work. So for him to say, act local, because like you said, we often think this is too big. I can't handle it, but we can do something in our own backyard. We can start with our own family, with our own neighborhood, our own whatever. And that's where that ripple effect really takes hold.
Well, and I think then we don't have to rely so much dependence. If we have a stronger community where we're relying on our local neighbors, then maybe we don't have so much dependence on governments and corporations. I'm not saying, I think we need a ton of help, basic services and, healthcare and different things. But what if we didn't have to rely so much because we were taking care of each other? So let's hear from Douglas.
Yes, let's.
One thing I offered, and not facetiously, in a talk was, what if we dedicated 1% of us to really understanding these global issues, right? So in America, we take 4 million people, right? 1%. And they are going to watch the news or divvy it up. So we put, 200,000 people on drones. There's 4 million. Just dedicate 4 million people. Is 4 million people enough to figure out the big top issues? I think so. So then if you have 4 million people doing that, then the other 396 million people in America can start working on how do we take care of each other? Where's the old people in my community that needs support? Where are the kids that need tutoring? Who doesn't have lunch? Who doesn't have access to food? How does this work? And yeah, you're going to do it in your neighborhood. And if your neighborhood turns out to be wealthy, then you can start worrying about your neighborhood can take care of the neighborhood next to yours. That Scarsdale can take care of Yonkers or whatever it is, or Beverly Hills can take care of Compton. If once they've dealt, you go to the neighbor one, it's okay. And start taking care of people. And the more that you do for each other, whether it's, borrowing a drill or teaching someone how to breastfeed their baby or tutoring a kid in algebra, the less people need to depend on the market's solutions for those problems.
All right, Jen, I'm going to give you this last one. I know what's coming.
You knew it.
I know it.
Me up.
So
You're
talk
just
to me.
You're serving me like the baseball. It's just, okay, I'm just going to, I have to end it on this one, Monica, because I feel like it's the one. We have to get outside.
Yep.
I mean, we have this conversation, I think, in every single episode. It feels like there's always the theme, of course, is nature. And how do we get people outdoors? And we're all doing it in different ways through our work of really showing people and educating people. And of course, showing the science, the data, the facts.
Yep.
And it's fascinating to me that so many people still don't know their science to why it matters. So I think this is such a big part that we can't ever overstate the importance of spending time in nature every single day.
Yeah. Well, in one of our very earliest conversation with Florence Williams, and her book, The Nature Fix, did exactly that. And she talks about why that's super important. So let's hear from Florence.
We know how to see that, blue water means safety and that green trees mean, fruit and things like that. And also safety, refuge, sort of this idea of refuge and prospect that, we descended, from apes, we still have this kind of arboreal, instinct alive and well in us. The biophilic, biophilia hypothesis is really something that was popularized by the Harvard entomologist, E.O. Wilson. And he looks a lot at, human biological evolution and evolutionary behavior. And what he has sort of articulated so clearly is that as an animal, humans have, evolved for 99% of our history outside. And so it makes sense that our nervous systems are sort of aligned to the cues that we get in natural landscapes. So for example, our perceptual system, we know how to read a natural landscape subconsciously. We know how to look for things that are life-giving, and generative and restorative.
Yeah. Like what you just said, introducing her.
Yeah.
She just, everything she said. Well, also, first of all, I love her, but she was one of the very first books that really got me thinking, The Nature Fix was, of how everything really, we are so reliant on the impact of our surroundings, of getting outside, and how it isn't just like, oh, it's pretty, but it also really improves our mental health. It helps reduce stress and anxiety and symptoms of depression, lowers cortisol levels, calming the nervous system, and increasing our serotonin and dopamine. Just by, I call it microdosing of nature.
I like it.
I got my microdose this morning on my walk. So
that's great.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to help you sleep, all the things you talked about. And we need to get that message out that it is a tool, right? It's a tool, just like exercise and good food is fresh air and, seeing green.
Absolutely.
I think the other thing that I like, and not everybody has the benefit to be able to walk out of your office and sort of walk on a trail, but we do sort of here. And sometimes you just need a 5-minute walk on a trail in the woods between meetings to sort of re-clarify, focus, and maybe kickstart that creativity by giving your brain a break from all this. We love this. But, and just not even listening to anything. Not that we don't encourage you to listen to podcasts on your walk, but, don't put anything in your ears and just listen to the sounds of nature. And that brief time can really help with memory, creative problem solving. And you do see corporations, companies starting to create biophilic design. Like Google's done an amazing job. Mary Devage talked about that. Judith Hirwagen, like really interesting people we've talked to about how companies, again, Oliver Heath, again, shout out Bill Browning again. But until everybody sort of gets on board, we're just going to continue to have these boxes that don't have any biophilic design, and corporations aren't going to incorporate nature into their campuses in a really thoughtful way.
That's the whole thing. It's a thoughtful and intentional. So if you put this idea of getting outside as an intentional act every day, just like you said, like even if you do yoga, you're eating well, you're going to the gym, whatever it is, understand that being outside is just, if not more important than anything else you can do. And it also, once we get outside in our own backyard, that's when we become that steward of the land. Yes. I always tell people, we don't have to go far, just go. And then you get to understand like the plants and the trees that are all around you. And that's when you then fall into, the seasonality. You get to understand, why isn't this growing? It's April now. It should be this. It should be that. So you become interested in the place where you are. And that's
and that reminds me a little bit of protecting, right? Rivers, parks, forests, and Hannah Palmer was a great one that talked about, kind of find your creek and river and sort of make it your own.
Yeah, I love that.
We won't create those bonds unless we get out there. So it's really a great way to be healthy, to sort of restart, maybe you need a brain break, and then also just stewardship for the environment. We've got to connect people.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Jen, there's so many people like, I remember David Orr, we did we kept talking to him, and we did a double episode. We did a second bonus episode. He was amazing. I want to go back and listen to him again. He's just so thoughtful. There were so many great people. And Richard Rhodes was fantastic, who wrote the book on E.O. Wilson. And that was really amazing that he was able to spend all that time with him before E.O. passed. He kicked off one of the past seasons. So I don't know, Jen.
Monica, we've had a lot of great guests. So I'm just so thankful that we have these conversations. I'm thankful to you and the entire team and everyone that listens every time we post. I think it's so important that we get to share the work of these incredible people that are really helping us tune into ourselves through of biophilic solutions.
Yeah. And maybe we're creating a little blueprint for a saner future, slow down, think in systems, choose hope. Design for a beautiful, good life, start simple, and then step outside. Thanks, Jen. Thank you, everybody. 100 episodes. Congratulations to all of us. We made it through, and here's to the next 100.
100%.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. Bye.
Bye, Monica. Thanks so much for tuning into Biophilic Solutions.
If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and subscribe on your podcast app and leave a 5-star rating, because your support helps us reach a wider audience.
And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share it with your friends.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another engaging conversation. See you then.